Hi, I'm Sam Anderson, Product Manager at Cane Creek Cycling Components, and today we're going to teach you how to install your hardware onto your double barrel rear shock. As you get hardware, it's going to come in a little poly bag and describe exactly the dimensions of the hardware. Make sure that you're putting the hardware on the right side of the shock. We do label them A on the adjuster side and B on the air can side or on the spring side if you have a coil shock. The tools that you need to make this happen are a vise and a 13mm socket. You can either use a long 13mm socket if you have a long hardware or a short one if you have a shorter hardware. So let's get started. So double barrel hardware is designed to be centered on your bicycle. That's why there's an equal amount of reducer items on both sides of the axle with the amount of space for the eyelet to fit in between. To install this properly, we're going to remove half of the reducer hardware on one side. Now the axle is ready to install into your rear shock. The first step that you want to do is make sure that your vise is ready to safely install the hardware on your shock. Today we're going to use a soft jaw clamp on the side that the hardware is going to be contacting the vise. If you don't have a soft jaw clamp, make sure that you use a rag and cover that side of the vise. Next, determine which side is actually easier to install the axle into your DU bushing. There is a chamfered side. For example, this side is actually not chamfered, so it will be more difficult to install the hardware, whereas this side, the axle will slide right in with just minimal pressure. With the hardware starting to install on this one side, make sure that you're contacting the soft portion of your vise. And this is the tricky part, taking the 13mm socket and trying to line up the axle so that it can slide through as you start to tighten. We've set up the shock in the vise. The goal here is to have this space of the axle go through the socket. So it's very important that you have this lined up properly. It should be minimal resistance as you wind up the vise. Remember, this reducer hardware is our indication that we've centered the axle. So let's begin. Holding the shock, minimal effort as I twist the axle and the vise. Go all the way until the elastic rubber band on the axle is touching the eyelet. Remove the socket, and then now we're going to add back the reducer hardware. We've installed the axle successfully, and we know that because the reducer hardware matches the distance that the axle is touching here, right? The next step is to reinstall the reducer hardware on this side. Very important. Match the orientation of the side of the reducers that you did not remove. So for this example, we've got the soft item going on first, a 4mm, the 1mm, and the 3mm. These orientations vary per hardware, but just remember to match the side that was not removed. We successfully installed the hardware on one side of the shock. The process is exactly the same on the other side. If you do not feel comfortable doing this or do not have a vise or a 13mm socket, hit up your local bike shop. Those guys can help you out. Remember to check us out on canecreek.com and subscribe to our YouTube page.